right. Welcome back to our Extra AI podcast series. And this is our Q2 AI news roundup, or what we want to discuss what has happened in the Q2 of 2026. I know specifically I would like to focus a bit on June, I think, but there are a lot of items, a lot of things that have happened. Welcome on board, Lucas, again.
Well, thank you for having me as always. And when you said let's do Q2, I was like, that's not going to happen simply because a week in AI can feel like a quarter. And I have enough information about what happened in June to easily fill all the time. But I'm also happy to take a look at the quarter and the bigger time horizons. But it's just time seems to be compressing more and more, regardless of whether you think it is already at the maximum of compression that it could be. It still gets crazier as far as I'm concerned.
Right, right. So as always, how we go over all these different categories, what is that I think you want to get going on? I know we have our regular categories of applications and agents. We also have things around platform and orchestration, the context, the tools and data.
How about we start from the top and we talk about applications and agents, and then from there on, it's dealer's choice, so you can choose whatever you want. I do think applications and agents are nice because uh, growing up, like in terms of like my professional career, WWDC, so the developers conference of Apple, has always been the staple of my year, and I've always followed what they are doing.
Mhm.
And Apple was a bit of a black horse in the AI race so far. Every other company has spent every single dollar that they had in, or still every single dollar they have in free cash flow, whether it's Google, whether it's Meta, whether it's Microsoft, to invest into data centers and AI specifically. And Apple has reneged the trend so far. So they have not built out AI, and they were seen as, well, missing completely out on the entire AI hype. At the same
Mhm.
time, because of their unified memory architecture, they are in a position where they're kind of lucky, right? Most of the edge devices and computers have separated memory for the graphics chip, for the central like memory, and Apple, through their now CEO, um, or announced CEO, have spearheaded a technology setup where they have very large memory footprint even on their phones, which is ideal for on the edge compute for small models. So in a way, it's kind of odd that the company with arguably the best hardware setup has trailed the entire field. And this year, what happened at WWDC is that they announced Siri AI. I mean, the naming, let's put that aside, whether you like it or not. I think the really important part is that they decided to partner with Google and use
Mhm.
Gemini as a local inference model. And in addition, have models in their data centers for specialized workloads. And I think now the cat is out of the bag, right? For now, Apple will not compete in frontier AI. They're buying this capability. And interestingly enough, they're not buying the really, arguably the only two models that are, from the vendors that everybody trusts, neither Anthropic nor OpenAI. Um, but I think there is an aspect where Google is just like a fantastic partner, and they
Mhm.
already sent money in both directions because, as you might remember, there was a big lawsuit about Google paying Apple for being ranked first as their search engine of choice. And so I guess because it's just easy to strike a deal with somebody already working a lot, I think there is now like this strange setup where Gemini will have like an incredible footprint of billions of devices that are enabled. Well, technically, it's only the new devices with a certain A15 or A16 chip and so forth. Um, but I think it's quite remarkable, and I wonder if that is temporary, or Apple has decided that they will supply the platform but not compete on that. And so I think that is, even if it's not the most thrilling news, Apple taking a stance and finally jumping into the deep end with AI, Siri AI, is by far the most important because it affects billions of people with Apple devices.
Right, right. I think that's going to be interesting to see, right? I think uh, Apple with I think they were. I don't want to say that they are late to the game. I think, but they have been very cautious on how to get into this or how do we redesign because they have a lot of information at hand, and of course, partnering with Google Gemini, I think would uh, easily make easy. I think it would easily make sense for them to kind of get into this game much more faster rather than building everything uh, like the stack completely up. But of course, we had to wait and see how these things are going to turn out. And of course, they have this huge monopoly, or I should say, at least a big share of this market when they come when you talk about the hardware devices and the mobile phones, right?
They're they're very adamant about not calling it a monopoly, but I would say in the highest paying tier of customers, the most interesting cohort of mobile device users, they have a monopoly for all intent and purposes. What I'm curious about is what will be their long-term goal.
Mhm.
Will they build their own AI once the dust settles and come late, but then as a fast follower, know exactly what they want and double down and do their own thing? Or will they open up and say, like, hey, bring your own Anthropic or OpenAI or Gemini, Google Key, and you can run any agent on our devices that you want. We
Mhm.
just bring the APIs for the agent being able to run on your phone and so forth. Or will they be in the middle and only go with Google, or maybe have some sort of a bidding war and rotate out the models every year? Who knows? Um, it's clear that this is, or at least to me, it's clear that this is not the end state, but
Mhm.
it's like a first opening salvo and the broad acceleration and rollout of agents to people. Because we're not talking about just AI, right? We're not talking
Right.
about I'm asking, and it's ChatGPT from 2023. This needs to go, and I'm not clear on exactly the capability scope right now, but it needs to be agentic. I want to tell my phone to look through my text, draft the response, and read it to me, and then maybe to two other things, right? It's not just like a prompt back and forth, it's a capability that needs to get things done on my phone. And I think that will be a very, very big market. And so it's important how Apple positions themselves.
Mhm. Mhm. I think, yeah. So let's get into the other category. I think one, there's a lot happening with these models and compute layer, right? I think which is,
Sure.
if you're okay, I think we'll get into that because I know there was a lot going on this layer. First, Mythos was banned, and then I think
Yeah.
then we had the release of Fable, and again Fable went through. I think again there were some issues with that. There were a lot of rumors about Fable. When you're using this model, I think you're being downgraded depending on what you're doing, and again Fable got banned. So I think this particular category, when we talk about compute and models, is becoming very, very interesting. What is your take on this? I think where are we heading? Uh,
So I totally think, by the way, that is the most important thing that happened without a doubt in June at the quarter, the year. There's no doubt about it. And, as they say, the Rubicon has been crossed. Like, if you walk over that line, the world changes and it will never be the same. Now, the US government essentially said, we there's a certain class of intelligence that cannot be simply distributed at will. And I think we had 4 years where just a credit card was sufficient to tap
Mhm.
into the frontier of intelligence. After what has happened, it's clear that those days are over. And whether you believe you're getting the frontier or not, like you're not. Um, so this is a really big step. And I think there is a lot of downstream effects, second order effects that people are only starting to understand. Let me give you one example. If you're selling tokens and if you're essentially putting out intelligence and monetizing intelligence, and that gets you banned, what is the rational strategy for a company that does that? Well,
Mhm.
you're not selling the tokens anymore. You're building whatever the intermediary product is that creates the value. So essentially, this ban on intelligence incentivizes every frontier model provider to now compete with every software company on the earth because there is no ban on consulting software. There is no ban on finance software. There is no ban on backend software. There is no ban on ERP software. So, like, literally every industry that has a value proposition you can disintermediate through creating software and adding intelligence is now like more attractive because
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about getting banned. Whereas selling tokens now is much more complicated issue, right? Um, and so this is just like one second order effect that I think people are underestimating. And I
Mhm.
would say there's 20 more. And we're like every week we'll add one more like aha moment. And also, last but not least, just because the US is doing it right now doesn't mean that nobody else will be doing it. To the contrary, every country will now think very hard what sovereignty really means
Mhm.
and how important it is to own compute, to own models, or at least to be the gatekeeper of this
Yeah.
technology and its distribution. And this is very more I think this is more impactful than we will look back and we'll say like, hey, this is like in June 2026 the world changed for sure.
Yeah. So that is where I think things get very interesting. I think you made one statement, I think, right? I think now every country, I think, looks at it and thinks about like, how do I, what kind of gatekeeping I need to do? Because I think this is where things get very interesting. Uh, we have to look into whether is the moat still going to be that better models is still going to be the moat, or is compute access going to be more uh, prominent, or how do we uh, handle this? I think these are some of the questions which will come out, right? I think, uh, and from then on, we see while it might depend on how each country might handle these kind of things. There is this conversation as well going on, right? I think maybe the hyperscalers will take over as the gatekeepers of these models, or
Hmm.
because they have kind of a better infrastructure layer or been there for a while. Any thoughts about that? I think what do you think about that? Because now when we talk about models and compute and this gatekeeping comes into place, uh, what is the play of these hyperscalers, and what do you think
Well,
is
I think
happening?
the hyperscalers are between a rock and a hard place, right? They want to make money, obviously. They have a lot to lose if they have restrictions on model restrictions. And so they cannot really decide how the US government will restrict model access. They need to
Right.
implement it. So first of all, that adds complexity for them,
Hmm.
meaning like how to roll out these models, because now you have a governance layer and there is not yet any clarity on how this will play out. You essentially, at least as far as the public knows, the reason that Fable and Mythos got banned was because of jailbreak attacks, which, in a sense, for somebody who's not technical, might sound scary. And I understand why it's perceived that way. But I think the important point is there is no model that cannot be jailbroken, right?
Hmm.
So every single model suffers the same, like fall back, like it suffers from the same ailment. Now, the question is, what kind of play can the hyperscalers now put forward? I think for the hyperscalers, if they have clarity on what models and how the process will run down, and because of their scale, it will be like essentially like capture of like regulatory capture, because then all of a sudden it's much harder to compete with them because you have like know your customer or whatever else they come up with, that they will be able to implement, but smaller competition won't. So you will see an erosion of competition, and you will see an environment that favors big incumbents. But we're not there yet. So at this point, it adds a lot of complexity and uncertainty.
Right. Right. I think very well said. I know things are going to get more interesting. Let's get into I know we briefly talked about the category or the bucket of trust, evals, and observability as well. But do you want to add anything else in this category bucket? I think we moved from
I mean,
models and compute and into
I
the.
think the ban on Mythos and what happened subsequently is the topic that needs to be discussed. In terms of trust and evals, I think it's pretty remarkable that the US government got away with essentially saying this technology is dangerous, so we will export control it, but not making clear
Mhm,
what it was that spooked them.
mhm.
Like, and what are they testing and what are they expecting? So we don't know like what internal demo they received. We don't know what exactly was shown, what was like who provided which information, and basically on what kind of eval they decided, or based on which eval they decided that this technology shouldn't be proliferated openly. Um, and that's quite unique, right?
Mhm.
Because everybody else would normally assume that there is some sort of statement. So that throughout the industry, there's clarity on how to behave. Because as a policymaker, you don't want people to randomly guess. You do want compliance. And compliance
Right.
is easiest if you have clear, structured assertions about what is inbound and out of bound, right? And what is like allowed, what shouldn't be done. And the the fact that this is essentially just going on vibes, I think that is the most interesting if we are talking about evals and trust, because let's say you were in a situation where you could just build like a new model and you could put it out there. How would you know whether you would be export controlled or not?
Right.
Are you
Right.
writing the White House? Are you writing the Secretary of State? Like, what would you say? Is it flops? Is it like a software bench? What kind of like what would trigger it? And um, like for instance, OpenAI somehow got sucked into it. Gemini, not. Meta, no. And what happens now if normally the frontier is 4 to 9 months ahead of open weight models from China. I mean, I think 2 years ago there were still open weight models from Saudi Arabia, some from Europe, and some, like some efforts from universities around the globe. But right now it's just China. What will the US do once Chinese models get to a capability level of Mythos, which arguably could be two,
Pretty
3 months
soon.
from now, right?
Yeah.
Very soon, right? What are they doing? Are you then like, is it contraband if I download a model? I mean, obviously, most people don't have the hardware at home, but you could buy a DJX Spark, sorry, DJX
Yeah.
Spark from NVIDIA. I mean, they're
Yeah.
costly, but I mean, I can totally see why people um, would decide, like, hey, I prefer to have my own model and intelligence that is ungated over, let's say, a new car, right? And
Mhm.
so, where will that end? Will that mean there is regulation on what you can run at home on your own hardware? Like, that is the trust, evil, and observability question that should haunt us. And I think if you're, in terms of game theory, if you're playing that out, right now it looks like we're getting into more paranoid and much more darker future much faster than people give it credit for or think.
Right. Right. So I would also like to add a few things here, right? I think, like you said, the Chinese models are like 4 to 6 months away, or 4 to 8 months away. But at the same time, models from OpenAI are quite fast, catching up quite fast. And what are the implications? And there are claims that some of these latest models that OpenAI did not release yet might be on the same level of what at least they are claiming, like Fable, if not Mythos, at least Fable. And then I know the next 2 quarters are going to be interesting to watch what things are going to happen.
Yeah, also, like, it directly, it's quite important what you're saying, because is extra export control, in my understanding, it applies if you want to sell or distribute something. What if they have a new model? Let's say Anthropic built a new model that is way more capable, that's only used internally, never disclosed. Do they have an obligation to
Even
disclose
tell,
capabilities?
yeah,
Yeah, sure. Or is it just if they want to productize and monetize that? I would argue that in the spirit of safety, you would want, like, the capability to be disclosed. But if it's quote unquote just export control, then you could make the argument that the rational, like, way ahead is to not disclose that you have built a new model, use it
right,
internally, build a ramp to accelerate your lead, and turn it into something that is either fully commoditized. So things that cannot be traced as, oh, this is a smarter model. You're just providing output that can be sold, or somehow obfuscate that you have, like, a much stronger capability in house.
right, right. Yeah, I think there are a lot of questions, I would say, than answers. I think these things will open up in the next few months to come. Very interesting topic. I would like to get into this other category or the other bucket of context, tools, and data, right? I think context engineering specifically is becoming the new enterprise AI mode, right? I think
Hmm.
because whether it is any kind of firm, I think claim that I have more business context. And this is where
Hmm.
you say that, okay, I'm going to build I'm on top of the models that I have. I do a lot of harness engineering, I add a lot more context, and then I build. So, what's your take about what happened in the maybe in the month of June, or maybe overall in the Q2 of 2026 in this space?
Yeah, sure. Um, I think people start realizing, and we have another guest. Fantastic. Hi, Manjeet. I think
Hey,
people
Manjeet.
realize. Hey, I think people realize that just having data is not enough, and that context engineering is nice, and harness engineering is nice. But what really, like, what will separate the winners from the losers is to what extent can I manage, govern, and improve the contextual wealth of knowledge, right? So whether it's a context graph or a context engine or a context brain or memory, whatever you want to call it, like people, I think, clearly understand that a lot of the modes from the past are gone. There's distribution, there's moving atoms in the real world, and then there is context. And there is so much else that can save your business. And I think that's also why the CEO of Palantir now runs around and tells everybody, hey, you're being abused by the frontier model providers. They're just gobbling up your data. You need to own your context. You need to not give away how your company runs and all the little details that could leak through the usage of AI that's unregulated and not thought through. And I think there's a lot to it. So in terms of context, context is the new data lake. And it is where the future competitiveness lies. And I think everybody understands that that is the case, yet nobody yet has a solution. We don't have open standards for how to manage context. We don't really have much in terms of what is the right product shape. There is skills, there's MCPs, there is markdown files, there's like tons of things. Like there's plenty of smart people trying to work and solve some of those issues. But it's very like dynamic and hasn't settled into anything at this point. So I would say if you want to be ahead of the curve, have a strategy how to exploit and protect the context that your company has built. And that is the sum of all things, how your company runs. It's the soft factors of what people have in their heads, as well as just the assets, whether it's the configuration of your backend system or it's the SOPs that make your company run in a specific way. So, yeah, that's my pontification on context tools and data. But now, more
Right.
importantly, it's great to have you, Manjeet.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
to have you,
No,
Manjeet. We just talked about the new application, I think the City AI, and then we talked a lot about Mythos and Fable, how they got banned, and then we just came into the context side of the things, how context graphs are becoming the new mode. So yeah.
no. I think Lucas, I liked what you were saying, and my takeaway is, hey, you rent the intelligence, but own your context, and that is
100%.
that is so true because these model companies would like to know about your context because
Yeah.
now they are realizing, okay, you are hitting the wall. So there's a few different ways I can see. For example, the Claude launch into the Slack bot, or I would say in Slack. So, and then I see people are talking about like if you can have this as your employee, your Claude running into your Slack, then are you giving the context away to Anthropic, for example, right? And potentially yes. I mean it. If you the more you use it as part of your channels and then others, then yeah, it will learn, right? Because that's kind of the so it'll be interesting to see, I think, in what ways we can protect and in what ways it's very tricky and hard to do. Um, and every company that I see, just to finish my thought there, what I'm seeing is I think everybody agrees that this is a moat and differentiator or a big opportunity. whether we look at what Snowflake is trying to do, whether what Box is trying to do, and then companies like us also, like, okay, how do we, like in the CRM space, and we are still figuring it out. I think it's a lot more involved than, as you said, Lucas, is just calling the MCP or just doing the permissioning on top of your data. It's really building that your brain and then the collective knowledge of structured data, unstructured data, your all the multimodality and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Right.
I was playing with Fable 5, and that's why I was lost in there. Sorry, that's why I'm late. And
So maybe
I
you can talk about Fable 5 then. I think
yeah,
we had some little conversation around that.
yeah. So two things. I think I just spent an hour on there. So two things that stood out for me. It still consumes your tokens very, very fast. And then I saw Anthropic is like, okay, we are resetting your tokens because they realized everybody was running into that situation within 30 minutes of using it. So for time being, I think they need to figure it out, that it's relatively very high token consumptions when you go from Opus to Fable in there. The second thing I realize is the version that I tried 10 days ago versus this one, it feels a lot more controlled and a lot more, use this term like nerfed, right? It is highly nerfed compared to the version. I was trying to create the same basic task like in my PM workflow, creating, give a scenario and then create a, brainstorming and slide. I felt it's kind of not that I was like, okay, it's asking me questions back and forth, and then right, so I'll know more, I think, in next 2 3 days. But I particularly didn't find it super exciting. Like, okay, from now on, I'm switching to Fable 5 for most of my tasks. And I saw the same sentiment on Twitter and a couple of other places as well. So yeah, no, I think it's interesting. OpenAI model 5.6, and then this Fable. I think it's kind of the same class in terms of capability, and then both these players are, I would say, in the top frontier league. Somehow Gemini has a lot of work to do. They need to catch up. I think nobody's talking about Gemini in the last 30 days. So
So which version of Fable 5 you are talking about? I think because I think one of the version got banned, right? I think or
no, so it's back today.
It's
it's back today.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the word I'm referring to. Like I've been playing with
amazing. I was
right.
just looking if I was back. Okay.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. No, I think that's to me, some of these model launches, I think they will go through this little bit of more governance and scrutiny from the the US government standpoint. Specifically, anything that touches a lot more cybersecurity and that part of the workflows, and then so you can't just kind of launch a new version. So so I think this was one of the, I wouldn't say like it's a bad launch, but the way the journey it went through in the last 3 weeks. So Anthropic launched it. People tried. There was a lot of excitement. Then it was taken away. Then there's sort of this interesting marketing play because that Anthropic always like, oh, this is not our fault, and they put a message on their website like, hey, it's government is who's blocking us. And so I saw this interesting, okay, but I'm glad it is kind of resolved to a certain extent because, this is an AI race, right? To continue to make progress, you can't keep these things halted into this indecisive state. So I'm glad to see the decision and Fable 5 is back, even though it feels like a little bit of more,
Restricted version.
Lot more guardrails and restricted versions. We don't know to what extent it is. And the same is GPT 5.6. That is also only available to a few certain people. So here is the part that I'm worried about now. And then I saw same sentiment from other folks as well. The top tier intelligence, I think it will not be available to all of us at the same time. So there
We
will be this lag of, in some cases, weeks, in some cases, months. And a month or two of this lag is so important for some companies like who
True.
are really relying, like in startup and others, like how would you compete? So they might lose out. And so, but that's the, I think, the unfortunate reality of where we are heading into after a certain level of, the intelligence.
we talked about it
Mm,
extensively in terms of the Rubicon has been crossed, will never be the same. I
right.
think there is no scenario in which you just need a credit card to experience the frontier of intelligence ever again.
Yeah.
That's done.
No, I somehow still feel envy that companies like Anthropic, the version that they use internally is way different than the versions that you and I have.
Oh, for
Yes, yes, that's
sure.
what.
Even from the opposite standpoint, because anything
And
that
they
you
may not,
see,
it may never come out, right? I think if at this
yeah,
rate at which things are happening, maybe
yeah,
maybe some of these companies might have very powerful versions and they may not even never come out.
right,
That's
right.
we talked about it and said like that is essentially the game theoretic move. If you're getting
Hmm,
banned for trying to sell stuff, then you're keeping it on the wraps and you're building the things that you can sell safely and you accelerate internal usage. So yeah.
right. Have you guys touched on this whole race around loops? So now
Yeah.
it's
No,
less okay. So
it very high. Yeah, maybe you can
yeah.
give your thought about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think if we, so in just in the last 2, 3 weeks, and particularly like in my workflow in engineering and other, like we have been experimenting with this idea of goal and loop from quite some time. But I think where the next unlock, we are also finding, and then we're seeing the same across the board is in a SDLC workflow. I think we can build these right loop across your writing code to testing and then and if as long as you can write good verifiers, like, okay, what's the your gates to validate and test, right? The combination of evals, think of those. Then you can run a lot of things autonomously while you are sleeping. And you just like the human in the loop requirement reduces a lot as you slowly build out these more loops and verified. And looks like some of these companies, that's how they have been operating now. Uh, so now the question become is like, oh, I've gotten good at prompting and I've gotten good at even the little bit of providing context part as we were talking about. Now what additional sort of the, art and science I need to build loops from the, individual skill standpoint and others. So that's the part basically I think of, like, a few different roles. Like, okay, if as a PM, if we need to get good at writing loops to our workflow, or if you are, let's say, in sales or marketing. But for most part, looks like still the coding domain is where the loops are being explored pretty deeply, and I think it gives this benefit, like you don't have to, you know, do it sequentially, and then it's like, hey, can these agents run in the night for you? So it's that a bit of your open claw things getting into this enterprise sort of SDLC um, workflow. So that's kind of my interpretation of the loop.
Right. Right. So I think I will want to now continue into the other two remaining
Mhm.
categories, the platform and orchestration category, and obviously the other one is the AI economics.
Mhm.
Which one do you want to pick up next? Manjit, maybe you can continue.
Yeah. So quickly, I think two things like in AI economics that are happening is this week, for example, Meta also jumped like, hey, we will also become a kind of a cloud provider, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that happened with the SpaceX last, because this whole thesis, like, okay, you build capacity as fast as you can, right, from GPU and data center standpoint. But then once you have this extra capacity, now as like, as an investor and shareholder, you get like, hey, what are you doing? Show me the ROI. So that's what happened when, Elon Musk and team, they build that, and now they kind of selling it to, right, all these other companies. Now, interestingly, Meta is also in that race now. And I saw their stock jump 10% all of a sudden, because that's like a very proven business model that if you have the capacity, you can charge premium dollars, right? Even though we already have big players like AWS and GCP and others, but it's still this shortage of more ready to use, both for training and more specifically for inferencing. All these other companies are looking for more GPUs to scale data. So I think that's kind of what I'm seeing is anybody who has extra capacity,
But
they have,
Mansh-
yeah.
but Manshit, do you really think they have extra capacity? Because I don't believe they have extra capacity. I think that they see that X got such a boost in terms
Mm.
of their valuation that they want to show the world that they are the biggest purchasers of NVIDIA hardware, that they can easily provide that, make money, get extra, because they have been under a lot of pressure in their AI ventures, right? They haven't
Yeah.
released a good model. Maybe they just want to take the pressure off of the
Yeah.
company, get some extra money to fund the build out, and then also just have some positive news. I wonder if, because I personally believe they would still be able to use all of the tokens, and they're not like running empty and don't know what to do with the compute capacity. I believe they're doing it to prop up the business and tell a good story that apparently Musk
Yeah.
has started. So
Yeah.
or do you believe they're really actually like they have too much compute and don't know what to do with it?
I think they're both parts. So here's my kind of, insight into why I believe that, because they built a lot of capacity for their Llama models,
Mhm.
and then okay, those will be used by both in the consumer and enterprise world. And that path has significantly slowed down. I don't think who is using Llama directly hosted onto, let's say, people still use it here and there on AWS and other one. However, their internal use, right? How Meta uses for their own products, right? In Facebook and others, and then right. So definitely their need is growing, the internal, but the capacity that they built, right? Because they have been spending almost 70-80 billion dollar even in last year, and then this year is even more, about $100 billion. So in that lens, they do have the extra capacity because the usage of Llama didn't go as planned. So from that side, I think that's where they were like, okay, now maybe we become a cloud provider, and so that's what I'm seeing. But at the same time, I mean, like all of these CEOs, like even if, for example, Google is now surprisingly losing capacity from from SpaceX, and it's a
Although you
big
could
amount.
say you could say like because Google did this and they're a huge investor in SpaceX, they were shuffling money over to SpaceX, improving the value, and it's
Right.
just like a nice game to play in order to earn a lot of money on their investment.
Yeah, yeah. No, in that sense, I think Google is in a good spot, both for SpaceX and Anthropic standpoint,
Yeah.
because they own a good portion of that. And then, so maybe he has some role, but I think the markets, the stock market and these things, the way I see it is you can't play them through these games for longer than 6 months or 9 months. So we will see where things land, let's say, 6 months down the line. Um, so if it was a temporary boost or if this is something more sustainable, and then um, yeah,
Yeah.
and then all these the second point, I'll keep it short, is all this thing around like the token maxing, and then
Token max.
companies, people, a lot of companies now like, okay, hey, our cost has skyrocketed and all our budget is now gone, and we have still 7 months to go for the year. How much token we should give to engineers and product, the different teams within the organizations. How do you budget them? How do you optimize them? And and it's all over. I think it's pretty kind of messy situation. There are not good tools out there that can let you monitor and control and guardrail. And so I think that part is yet to be figured out.
I think that anti-token maxing is picking up the wave. I don't know how to put it around, because like you mentioned, how do I measure the token usage and these tokens that I've used, in what context that I have used, and in a particular set of tokens I have been using, and how can I do a reconciliation of these tokens? Have I use it in the right way? Anything from you?
Yeah, no, I think it's very tricky. My personal experience is you pick up any team, for example, let's say 10-member team. And if you look at their usage pattern, what you will see is there's one or two people in the team who are, I would say, a lot more curious and mature, and then running these loops. And those are the people might consume $10,000 of tokens in a month versus the others. So you don't want to restrict those people because they are really, even if you look into their usage and all those, they're running these loops and like on entire repository and all that. But then also you will have the people in the team that are also consuming somewhere in the middle, but then you can't really correlate with the ROI. And then so that's where it becomes very tricky, right? In the sense, um, you want people to be token maxing, but how do you correlate it with to the outcome to a certain extent? Uh, so now in our team we use like outcome maxing and token maxing, and then what's the link link between the two? And we're trying to build some more tracing and then you can only measure it over a period of time. You can't do it on a week or two, and then you need a little bit of decent amount of 2-3 months of data. Then only you can, I think, see, okay, where we should continue to get more capacity, we should be throttled down.
I just think tokens should be invisible to the user. People who use AI should not be aware how many tokens they're consuming, because otherwise you will just turn it into some sort of a metric, good or bad. And that's not what it should be. It should be the value you create. And I think whenever you visualize or make privy the information to the user, you're getting down bad incentives. And you should from day one establish, if you're creating value, you're creating value. That's what's count, right? Yeah. But I do think it's where the industry is going. I think people, like I'm old enough to remember that startups in the .com, before the .com crisis, were proud of their burn, because it showed like if you can essentially invest money fast, you're building up a moat. You're installing your hardware, you're ramping up your operations. And so burn, like how much money are you spending, was a token of pride, pardon the pun. And if you didn't spend enough per month, you weren't considered as serious about your business and ramping up and blitz scaling, Back then it was like, oh, you have to be fast, and everybody is like a winner takes all market participant, and this kind of like delusional like perception of markets. And that completely evaporated after the .com crash. Nobody said like, I'm so proud that my burn rate is $1 million per month or whatever. And I think token maxing is the same. People will like, in the future, people will go like, okay, that was just like a really bad way of creating incentive structures.
Right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think but one additional nuance we have there, Lucas, let me know what do you think is because this tool chain is new, there's so that there's a learning cost and the time that everybody has to go through. So what I mean by that is, let's say if you are a CEO of the company, and then you have 20 people who haven't worked on this tool set. So you have to give them like, okay, learn it take it 2-3 months and then burn whatever because that's how you know what is the limits, what is the good. And then once, let's say people have gone into level 1 to level 2 and 3, and you can have some outcome mapping, then you will hopefully find the like balance and then those.
So you
No,
mean
for sure.
innovation will be triggered only when you give them at least an open way of using this. I think that is where at least a few. Yeah, sure.
No, and it's like, for example, we had $300 limit in the beginning. Some of the like developers, they were like, hey, it's 9 a.m. and my $300 is gone. So now my productivity will be low, right? So, and that's true. I mean, that's, if you look at like that guy, person or C or they were really doing the whole kind of these testing work and all that, and now it consumes. So, uh, it's pretty, I think, the little bit of nuance and contextual right now. But where it will land is, my take is like, hey, for every given role, what is the cost for the human and what is the cost for their AI usage? So that will be kind of from CFO standpoint, what's the total cost?
Interesting enough, at Anthropic, the cost for a token is much higher than for the headcount, just as an indicator where the industry is going.
Right. Yeah.
I know we are getting on the top of the hour. Any closing remarks from you, Lucas, what you're waiting for, what you're looking forward? And then I'll come over to you, Manjit, too.
I mean, ultimately, we talked about a lot of the ban of frontier models. And I think for me, the most interesting long term, not like every day, but now let's say next couple of months, how the players will position themselves. China, Europe, the US, and the unintuitive second order effects of investment, sovereign cloud, regulation. Because I can see that the world in 3 years from now could look radically different in terms of completely being shut off, that there is not like one internet anymore. There is not one kind of like AI model that everybody talks about, like Anthropic or OpenAI, so ChatGPT or Claude. And I think it's very much up in the air. And it's not a decision just by research engineers and product managers. I think we're now gravitating to hard power and the reality of politics. And that is something that normally business folks and software people are not very comfortable talking about, or not, at least not used to. And so I'm curious to see where this is going.
Over to you, Manjit. Any closing remarks and what you're looking forward?
Yeah. So what, other than, these models and intelligence, I think the adoption is where, I'm spending a lot of energy. And if these things don't get adopted to a level of, somewhere, let's say if you plot the trend chart, the spending is one, the expectation from like, and if you see these references or playbook these other companies are sharing, and you like, okay, why we can't do it? And what level of transformation do you need? If everybody, let's say, have access to the same Fable 5 model, let's say, and then what it will take for us to move fast, and the launch cadence, and more importantly, how do you stay relevant and build moat? So I'm into a lot of these conversations every day, week, with customers, and then people are struggling to visualize and see, like, 18 months from now, what will be our moat as this disruption is happening from a few different angles. Particularly, I think the big questions in overall SaaS industry, and but I think this applies to, it's just a matter of time. It can impact any of the, let's say, cybersecurity. Like, let's say the full Fable 5 comes, we don't, that can go either way. Same is, I think the hardware is a little bit of feels untouchable right now. So anybody who is on this, not just the chips and then in general hardware bucket they're working on, they are having the best time in the last 1 year or so, both from the, and hardware is hard. But I think the ones this some of these design cycles and those will get condensed, I think that sector will also see the some rebalancing. But right now, they are having kind of a lot of advantages, and then every stock is up, and every like memory companies are. I can't believe like these companies became a $1 trillion company, not just one. I think there are all 2 or 3 of them. So it's just that supply and demand. And then, and I was reading some data on, so the same chip that Apple uses in their iPhone, they used to pay $4.75. Now they have to pay $55. Apple didn't do it, just that everybody else sucked these chips from, microns and others. And then there's like, so as a result, your iPhone price is going up and you see this impact. So on the consumers, I think in a short term at least, we will pay a lot more, some of these gadgets and things will get more costlier. Some of my friends, they complain about their electricity bill went up, from $100 to $300. They didn't do anything. They are unhappy because all the data center in their neighborhood is sucking up all the powers. And I was like, okay, oh my God, people are worried about water also. But I think the water, what I'm seeing is latest thing from Microsoft and Nvidia. I think these new racks and then this cooling. The water consumption has reduced significantly, at least in the new stack. So hopefully that water problem will be less. Electricity, I think, will continue to be the memory and electricity is the 2 main one that I'm seeing. Anybody, they're enjoying this supply and demand and premium for let's see how long.
Yeah, I know we are really top of the hour.
Right.
Thanks for both of you. We didn't even touch SpaceX and the IPO and other things, but we will discuss end of this month. I think.
Yeah.
See you folks in 4 weeks. And Sesh couldn't join today due to some travel and other escalations. But looking forward to join you guys again in 4 weeks' time.
All right. Yeah. By the time.
Have a wonderful long weekend.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, guys. Take care.
Outro, a big thank you to our wonderful guests on the XTraw AI panel for helping us unpack the biggest AI shifts from Q to 2026 across applications and agents, orchestration platforms, enterprise context, models and compute, trust and observability, and the fast-changing economics of AI. What stood out this quarter is that AI is no longer just about smarter models or better chat interfaces. We are now seeing the emergence of agents as a new operating layer for businesses, developers, consumers, and entire industries. The real conversation is shifting toward how these systems are orchestrated, governed, trusted, and scaled in the real world. To our listeners, stay glued to XTraw AI for more interesting conversations, sharper perspectives, and deeper explorations into where artificial intelligence is headed next. This is Raghu Banda, and until next time, let's keep extracting the raw AI conversations. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep exploring what's next in AI. Happy predicting the future with XTraw AI.